Welcome back to the Ignore the Temple podcast, the only FPL podcast on the entire internet, hosted by me. My name is Devin, and today we're talking about optimized wildcard. Because I'll probably do it a couple different ways, but also there's a ton to talk about. There's double game week on the cards, so let's jump straight into it. Okay, now before we get into the team that you see on your very screen, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening at home through podcast, whatever, I will go through the full team in a second. I just want to give a little bit of an explainer on what optimization is, how I got this team that we're looking at, and just give a little bit of background, because I think that's important and goes very easily missed for people that just are hitting a button on a website that they pay, $5 a month for. Okay, so I'm going to try to break this down as easily as possible, so anybody could understand it, so I could understand it, because I have a very difficult time explaining it myself, and I run all this nonsense, and I got degrees in statistics, and it's still very difficult to understand, I think. But optimization is a process you can run through any sort of programming language that, given a set of restrictions, in FPL's case, you have a budget of £100, dollars, whatever you want to call it. It is pounds, I guess, technically. You have these restraints, the budget. You have to have 2 goalkeepers, 5 defenders, 5 midfielders, 3 forwards. You can only have a maximum of 3 players per team. And imagine you feed that computer all of those constraints, and then you basically just say, take this column and show me the absolute maximum you can get. In this case, we're looking for point total. And it will provide all of the players that will fit that optimization, and spit out the highest scoring team given those metrics. And even going a little bit further, the criteria or the data that I feed it is even a little bit more sophisticated, because I am only looking at projected points across the next 5. And if you have followed this YouTube channel / podcast, you'll know that I provide all of the data on Airtable that you can go and look at. And the column that I'm basically referring to is projected X points. So that's the points projected across the next 5, which is weighted by their fixture difficulty rating. Hopefully I'm not losing anybody at this point. I'm kind of already rambling, but so it's weighted by the fixtures. So players that have easier fixtures, their average points per game is basically going to be pushed up, and players that have more difficult fixtures, their points per game will be kind of weighted down. And then the other differentiation there that I need to kind of explain is that I go based off the underlying data, not the observed data. That's something that I could do as well. However, my philosophy is that players tend to regress towards the average expected data that they're able to produce. So if a player is shooting X amount of times per game, and they happen to score, like let's say, good example, Wilson, who's massively overperformed his XG. Let's say he took 5 shots and scored 5 goals. That would be an extreme example of overperforming their XG. If we fed the optimization tool and set that data and said, basically on average, this guy's going to score every single shot that he takes, he's going to be like ridiculously overly inflated in the model. Whereas if we use something like XG, which is based more around shots, shot location, shot quality, then it gives a little bit more of a nuanced measure of how likely a player is to score, or if we're looking at XA, expected assist, how likely a player is to give a pass that then goes on to score. And I've realized I probably lost 99% of you. And funnily enough, now that I'm on YouTube, I could see the average time spent on the video. I'm not doing well, guys, but this is a fun project of mine, passion project. If you are interested and like this kind of content, subscribe, like, whatever. I don't really care, but would be nice. So yes, if I haven't lost you, hopefully you're still engaged and we can talk about the actual team that has been optimized. And I'll say one last thing before we start going through the players is that this is kind of a challenging thing to optimize, because not only is optimization kind of a challenging problem on its own, but with FPL, because you have substitutes, like, you can optimize it a couple different ways. You can optimize for a certain formation. You can optimize based on 15 players, and that would give you everybody, but that's not really the ideal way to do it, because you're not playing 15 players every single week. You tend to want to optimize based on a formation. And what I did is I ran every formation you could feasibly play in the game and just looked at that optimization score to see which formations were best. And the one that popped was the 4-5-1, surprisingly enough. So across, basically what that tells us is across the next 5 game weeks, the highest projected expected point total based on optimization is a 4-5-1, and the second place one closely followed was a 4-4-2. So from those two formations, I was basically able to gather an extra forward and an extra midfielder, basically. Yeah, when you optimize both ways, 4-4-2 gave me an extra forward to look at, 4-5-1 gave me an extra midfielder. So between those, it gave me information to basically fill out all the players. And I also looked at, just for clarity, I also looked at a 5-4-1 to get that final 5th defender as well. So then it's all filled out. Okay, sorry that took so long to get to it, but yeah, it's a complicated thing. I think it is kind of important. So hopefully I will get better at describing it, but going through goalkeeper, Robin Roofs, and he is like far and away the best goalkeeper by the underlying data. By value, he's one of the best. They've got great fixtures across the next 5. Robin Roofs is kind of an obvious choice. Great first match as well if you are wildcarding for Gameweek24. They play Burnley at home. That's about as much of a banker of a clean sheet as you're going to get. And also in goal, Dubravka, but everyone has him as the bench goalkeeper, so we don't need to talk about that. Moving into defense, the optimization tool chose Chalaba, Gabriel, Senesi, Munoz, and Lacroix. So I can imagine people are already kind of squinting and questioning a couple defenders there, namely Senesi and Lacroix. Given a lot of people had Senesi towards the beginning of the season, and not so great of a performance between then and now. However, the Bournemouth fixtures are amazing, and Senesi is great for the defensive contributions. So I still think he's a great pick for a wild card if you're wild carding right now. Lacroix, I can also imagine a fair amount of skepticism. People much prefer Munoz. But again, the fixtures are really good for Crystal Palace. This is based on expected goal differential, and there are some external factors that it's difficult to factor in, like Crystal Palace playing quite poorly, the announcement, Gehi leaving, Glasner saying that he's not going to stay another season, Mateta potentially leaving. That will probably not impact the defense, but these are all kind of interrelated things that lead to not the best atmosphere and may contribute to diminished performances. But all that aside, I just want to go through the team because we also need to talk about double game week 26. That should be factored into this wild card. So I'm just giving what the algorithm produced, and then I'll make some adjustments. We'll talk about double game week 26 and go from there. So moving into the midfield, just going from left to right, not any particular order. Ismail Assar, Mbumo, Enzo Fernandez, Bruno Fernandes, and Declan Rice. I feel like that's pretty straightforward, honestly. I think 4 out of those 5s are nearly locks for everyone, just common sense. But Ismail Assar probably hasn't been on everyone's radar. His point total is not super high because he's been injured. He was away at AFCON. He's an amazing player, points per game wise, and especially by the underlying data. So I love Ismail Assar. We'll talk about what I'm going to be doing this week, but he is 100% high on my list moving forward. And then in the forward line, not really a surprise here, but Erling Haaland and Thiago are the 2 forwards that were picked. The third one, I didn't really optimize for this, but I think from a strategic standpoint, Krupi Jr. is just the best. He's got pretty good minutes recently. Tavernier's hurt. Semenyo's gone. I think overall he's probably shown better form than Evan Nielsen up top. But of course, that doesn't necessarily mean he's a lock for minutes. But out of the very cheap forwards, which I think is the best strategy, putting more money into midfield and defense, I think Krupi Jr. is just a standout. Because you're not going to play 15 players a week. So you have to make decisions. And based on that, considering that if you're playing your wild card, you're probably thinking about at some point you want a bench boost. Krupi Jr. I think is the best super cheap forward that you can leave on the bench forever. And then when you play your bench boost, hopefully he comes on for a match. Now, the algorithm doesn't know about double game weeks. That is, first of all, the double game week has been established that there will be a double game week in 26, but who plays in those matches is not 100% confirmed because obviously it depends on the result of the EFL Cup second leg. So if you're on YouTube, you'll see that I have a tweet by Ben Krellin pulled up and essentially all the details there. I'm not going to go through an insane amount of detail, but Arsenal are up by 1 goal from the first leg. If they go on to draw or win against Chelsea in the second leg, which is at home for Arsenal, they will have a double game week, and also Wolves will have a double game week in game week 26. If by some magic miracle Chelsea somehow overturn that tie in the second leg away from home and that 1 goal deficit, they will be the team to double in game week 26, and also Everton. So if we go back to the wild card, it's tough because let's say on the off chance that Chelsea somehow pull it out, there's probably quite a few changes you would want to make to this lineup, because that would mean both Everton, who have been pretty good, and their fixtures are pretty good as well. Not as good as like a Crystal Palace or a Bournemouth. Their fixtures are still pretty good. You could have a Tarkowski here instead of Munoz. Excuse me. Burping into the mic. What kind of etiquette is that? You could have a Pickford over a Roofs. The budget is starting to get a little tight there, but I guess you could have swapped Tarkowski for Lacroix instead, but let's go with this. Money's already kind of tight at this point because we've got a stacked midfield and defense. So at that point, you'd have 2 Everton players and you'd have 2 Chelsea players. I don't know if you necessarily need a third Chelsea player. Like, who would that be? I guess a lot of people would probably think Palmer's the obvious one. For me, he just has not played enough to be in contention for that. And maybe by the time we get to game week 26, I'll have different feelings. But if I was on a wild card for game week 24, where it's not even likely that Chelsea double in 26, I would not be leaning that way. So I think 2 Chelsea players is fine. I don't think that there's an amazing standout. Like, instead of Pickford, you can go for Sanchez. That's a sideways move, pretty similar. One other thing you could do, instead of Ismail Assar, you can go for Njai. And I think that would be pretty optimal. So that if you have a lot of confidence that Chelsea will overturn the tie, I think this is a fairly decent wild card for that type of setup. And you can tinker on your own. This is just kind of like a base level reference to make updates from. However, if Arsenal come through and win, which is the most likely, most probable outcome, you're not going to want all these players. You're going to want to kind of revert. And I think you will want 3 Arsenal players. I think that's pretty simple. They've got a lot of good assets, unlike Chelsea at the moment, where it feels like, to me, basically, it's really only Enzo and Chalobah with, I guess, maybe Neto, but across the double game week, they're probably going to get rotated. Let's be honest. With Arsenal, the lineups are a lot more consistent, so you can feel a little bit more comfortable going for like a Timber. Let's get Timber in here, and it's going to blow up my budget, I think. No, it's still actually feasible. I think that the optimal trio of Arsenal players is Gabriel, Timber, and Rice. We can go through the data in a little bit. Just wanted to kind of throw some spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. And if you're asking me if I would have any Wolves players, simply no. I probably wouldn't. You could do Krupi, or you could do Mane instead of Krupi. Are you really, like, the second fixture is against Arsenal? Is that, how much are you gaining by having Mane in there, who I know that he went on a pretty good run when he was becoming popular. I just, once we look at the data, you'll get a better idea of why this opinion is coming out of my mouth. But I just don't think there are any good Wolves assets at the moment. They're playing a little bit better than they did in the early part of the season, but the bar for that is so low. So I would just go with Krupi. I think he's a marginally better asset than Mane. And yeah, even if Krupi Jr. had a double game week, I don't know if he's playing over like a Thiago or Haaland, because I think they could do a lot more damage in one game week than a Krupi Jr. or a Mane could do in 2. But that's just my opinion. We could look at the data to back that up a little bit, but yeah, I don't think I have any other thoughts on this wildcard team. Hopefully I gave you enough variation to come to your own decision on that, but that's what the algorithm is saying. Once we have more clear information on what the double actually will be, it will be a little bit more clear on which direction you want to swing. But I think conservatively, something like this, I mean, honestly, you could go both ways. Like, the difference between Njai and Sar is not going to move mountains for your rank, I don't think. Although I definitely prefer Sar. If there is a 10% chance of Everton doubling, I think he could be a better option across the next 5. Okay, now that we've talked about wildcard, hopefully that covers all that. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going back. We're reversing. We're Uno reversing. And just to, obviously I don't have that team up, but basically the team that I discussed on the podcast a couple days ago is basically a carbon copy of what the algorithm came up with. So I think a large majority of that is not only do I tend to go based off the stats, but there are just so few options. A lot of these picks are just no-brainers. Like, it kind of sucks. And this is like my weekly departure just to rant about how the pricing is just so bad. When you can choose all the players who have the highest points per match on average, with like a little variation, and you can afford all of them, it's not really that much of a decision. So everyone is going to be in the same boat, affording basically the same players. And this is the story of FPL. I don't love it. I wish the pricing was a little bit better, but here we are. They feel constrained to have, like, there has to be certain players at a certain price, and they don't deviate from that generally. So, okay, I'll shut up. Let's take a look at my team, because with the news of the double game week announcement, that has changed my opinion a little bit on what I was going to do. Because if you remember, if I even discussed it on the last podcast, My plan was to use my 2 free transfers, and it was probably to go from Phil Foden to Mbumo and to go from Jack Grealish to Ismaila Sarr. I think I'm going to keep my powder a little bit dry this week. So I did actually make one of my 2 free transfers, so relatively dry. I guess my powder is going to stay. I did already go from Foden to Mbumo. It's a price thing because my budget is really tight here. I've got 0.1 million in the bank. I couldn't afford Foden to go down and Mbumo to go up, and I think they're both pretty close, or at least Foden I think is pretty close to going down again. So I had to make the move, unfortunately, because at this price point, there's just really not a whole lot better. And that allows me, going early on that allows me to save my transfer for next week. So next week I'll have 2 transfers. We'll know who the double game week is. And that would drastically change my opinion. Like if Chelsea did pull out the deficit on the EFL Cup and they were the double game week team in 26, I would go from Grealish to Njai for the upside on the double. If I were to make this move now, I'd probably go for Ismaila Sarr, assuming that Chelsea are not going to double. But I'm just going to wait 1 week on that. I feel like I'm pretty sufficiently covered. Like Ismaila Sarr would probably come on for Thiago or Gehi, I guess. It's kind of marginal. I don't feel like it's that big of an improvement. I love Ismaila Sarr, but I could wait 1 week, I think. And on the flip side, if we find out that Arsenal go through, which is the most likely outcome, what I'll probably end up doing next week is going from Saka down to Rice so that I can go on and afford Timber, I guess. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of options. I don't think I would go for Saka. He's just too much of a rotation risk on a double game week. I'd much prefer, I think Timber is a little bit more locked for a double game week than Saka is. Maybe that's dumb. I don't know. But either which way, I'm covered because if I just hold this Jack Grealish transfer, his price is going nowhere. He's price locked, I think. He's red flagged. Yeah, and Lacroix could honestly play here. You know, I probably will play Lacroix over Gehi. Oof. Maybe. Oh, man. Okay. We'll talk about my team in a second. But yeah, just wanted to. What am I doing? Just wanted to talk about those transfers yet. So basically, Mbumo's in the door for Phil Foden. The reason I did that is I think that there's a lot bigger upside for Mbumo. I think Foden, he's performed terribly, and that's not the reason I'm getting him out. The reason I'm mostly getting him out is I don't think his minutes are as nailed as they were, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So if Foden was still super nailed, there's a chance I wouldn't have even made that transfer. So that's my thinking and mindset. Can I get out of this? Stop. Okay. But yeah, so the plan for my team, I think, hold off on the Grealish transfer. Wait 1 more week until we know who is playing in that EFL Cup final, meaning who's going to be in the double game week for 26. And then next week, Grealish, I'm pretty certain will go. I've been trying to sell him for weeks, but there's just, it's not necessary. Foden was a higher priority because I think Mbumo playing as a 9, playing against Fulham at home, there's upside this week and down the line because Manchester United's fixtures are very, very good. And that is where my head's at. Let me know in the comments or whatever, or on Discord, that link's in the description, or on Reddit, that link's in the description. Just hit me up somehow. Let me know if I've lost my mind on that. Is there any obvious transfer I'm kind of missing? Let's go through the data and hopefully kind of back that up. Okay, here is the data. I'm going to try to be as descriptive as possible for those listening on podcast, but essentially what we have is it's a replication of what is on the Airtable. That link is in the description, and it's updated, by the way. If you're listening to this, it should be up there. I I think I need to rename the file to make it more clear, but the data are updated, I should say. This is a version just like on an Excel, so I can kind of color code things a little bit. And I have sorted by projected X points across the next 5. And I have filtered by matches so that we only have players that have played more than 11 matches, just to remove some of the outliers that only played a couple. So I have highlighted all the players that I currently own. So we can see I'm in a pretty comfortable position. A lot of the players towards the highest part of this spreadsheet, which is sorted in descending order on projected points. So meaning we would expect these players to get the highest amount of points across the next 5 fixtures. Most of those are in green. So I own those players. That makes me feel comfortable. So top of the list, Bruno, followed by Holland. Also, I should probably note, that's pretty interesting. It's just because Manchester United have much better fixtures. They've ranked 4th out of the 20, whereas Manchester City are ranked 15th in terms of their fixture difficulty rating. So even though Erling Haaland has a higher points per match, expected points per match, because the fixtures are much easier for Manchester United, that does bump Bruno's kind of overall projected points across the next 5 over Haaland, but not by much, just by 3. So Bruno, Haaland, Gabriel. I don't own Munoz. I think I would dodge that. I have Lacroix, and he's even potentially a sell, not because of their fixtures, because they've got the second best fixtures according to my data. It's just, the former Crystal Palace, a little too unpredictable for me at the moment. So I don't think I'm going to be buying Munoz. I don't think I could potentially sell Lacroix. Question for another day. But after Munoz, it's Enzo, followed by Senesi, followed by Mbumo. That's why I brought him in. Followed by Ismail Assar, then Lacroix, Chalobah, Thiago, Richard, surprisingly enough, again, fixture difficulty rating. Then Tarkovsky, Mateta, Keane, Mohamed Salah, haven't heard that name in a while. Dan Ballard, Mark Gehi, Tavernier, Saka. You get the picture. So the majority of those players I own, I think it's best to go position by position. So let's just keep things in check. Let's look at the goalkeepers. I don't own Robin Roofs, but he is a clear best goalkeeper in the league this season in terms of FPL assets. From a value standpoint, he is the highest value added per million based on the observed data and based on the underlying data. Pope is kind of close on both. Oh, actually, Pope has a higher value added per million based on the observed data. That is interesting. I guess that's because as Pope is okay. Yeah, they're about the same price, but higher points per game for Pope compared to Roofs. So food for thought. I don't think I'm going to bring in either of those, but yeah, I've got Pickford. I'm generally happy with that. I don't think I need to move mountains to change it up by any means. So Pickford and Dubravka, fine for now. If I was on wildcard, Roofs would be the obvious decision. Now let's move it along to defenders. Okay, defenders, we've talked about quite a few of these already. Going through the list, maybe some more differential picks if you are interested. Dan Ballard, Reece James, injury concerns. I wouldn't go there personally. I'd probably be more likely to go for Cucurella, but I think he's pricey. Value added per million is fine, but it's not like these. Again, why is everyone's value added per million like so high? It's because the prices are ridiculous this season. Mitchell, interesting. Okay, I guess it's based on Crystal Palace's fixtures again. Timber, not a differential. Kanate, no. Truffert, that's an interesting pick. If you're not going for a Senesi, I think Truffert would be a good alternative, although I think Senesi's is a big enough differential anyways. So I think the big ones that I would like to bring into my team, which is again reflected in the wild card, Senesi and Chalobah would be good picks right now. but I don't think my defense needs the transfer per se. Like going from Lacroix to Senesi, it's not a massive shift across 5 game weeks, 3 points that might get me. So I don't think that's worth the transfer personally. Now, if we get the double game week, then Gabriel honestly might be captaincy material for that week. He's had amazing points per match, expected points per match. He could be a good option for double game week, but that is something we would need to factor in for Timber as well. So despite the fact that his projected points across the next 5 is like 24, we also have to add in another basically like 5 points. So if we put that up to 29, he shoots right up the ranking, pretty much in line with Chalaba and Lacroix, a little below Senesi, but he would have that extra fixture with the double game week. So it would make sense to make a transfer, even if it's worth like a -4, even if you have a -4. Obviously, if I was taking a hit, it would be closer to the double game week just to be sure that he's going to play, but definitely a player I may bring in on just a free transfer. Alrighty, moving into the midfield. I'm generally pretty happy with the midfield at the moment, which is kind of surprising. The one massive omission that if you're watching on YouTube, you cannot see, but I am scrolling down and there's Jack Grealish on the projected points table, like way the hell down here. He's injured and my bench is okay. So this is a player I could wait a week, but if I was to move him to, let's say, a double game weeker in Declan Rice, although I can't afford that right away, or even if we're taking double game weekers off the table, if I moved him to Ismail Assar, I could net myself almost 10 points across 5 game weeks. So that's a good transfer. I'm not going to do it this week, obviously, because if we find out that Chelsea and Everton are the ones doubling, I think I would probably go for Njai, even though his expected point total is not projected to be higher than Ismail Assar across the next 5. But if we go to that one individual game week, he probably would have a higher projected point total. It's just like over this next 5 game weeks, it gets a little bit evened out by the sample size. So I think Njai would be a good pick, especially if I don't need to play him most weeks, because then his expected point total per match doesn't really even come into the equation. It's really the other guys, Bruno, Enzo, Mbumo, Saka. These are the guys that would be getting the minutes, and then this wouldn't really matter, but it would matter for that one double game week where you would probably anticipate him to get about 8 points across 2 games on average again, but which is better than like Bruno Fernandes on a single game week. So a lot to consider. Double game week is not rocket science. You basically can expect to double the points. That's never going to happen though. It doesn't usually work that way. But the probability is there. It's all probability. Okay, let's move on to the forward line. My voice is getting hoarse. We're almost there though. Okay, forward line, super easy. Don't need to make any changes. The only player I'd consider would be a super bench option for Krupi Jr. Holland and Thiago, I'm not touching that. It's clearly the best forward duo in FPL this season. Nobody even remotely comes close in terms of value for Thiago, in terms of expected or projected points. There's just no clear alternative in the forward line. Now, because I did talk about it, comparing Krupi Jr. and Mane, here's the reason I would go for Krupi Jr., even though Mane may double in 26. So by the underlying data, he should have about 1.86 points per match. He's actually gotten 3.17 points per match, which is exactly equal to Krupi Jr. I think this is more of a variance thing. He's only played 12 matches. He did very well to overperform in a couple matches, like basically 3 matches, right? He got goals in. So based on the balance of probability, would you expect this to be the closer figure, 3.17, or would you expect 1.86 to be the closer figure? And it's not much better for Krupi Jr. if we're being completely honest, but, and I guess this applies to Mane as well, you would probably anticipate Krupi Jr.'s minutes going up. And while he has overperformed, it's not as to a big a degree as Mane did. And it was over a slightly bigger sample size, 6 more matches played. So to sum that up, I feel a lot more confident going for Krupi Jr. Even if Mane were to double, even if we were to double this 3 points to get a 6-point total, it's barely, it's scratching the surface over Thiago. So would you bench Thiago even in a single game week versus Mane's double game week when they play Arsenal? Probably not. So personally, I would just go for the player with the slightly better underlying data, slightly better player. Hopefully his minutes get better, which would translate to more expected goals and expected assists per match. Because again, these are all per match data. Sorry if I keep flinging that thing up. This is per match data. Since he's gotten a lot of substitute appearances, that actually hurts him. So he's played very similar minutes, but he's played a lot more matches, meaning he's come off the bench and had little cameos. So I think his numbers are much more likely to get better with more minutes than Mane. I never said this was the most professional podcast, and that is more and more true every single episode. But hopefully you guys like. Let's move on to the final segment of the podcast, which will be discussing the free hit team that I put out every single week and goes up against the official FPL scout team. I did see that the scout team came out. I didn't clock any of their players, but let's just run through a free hit team that I'll put up against them. And I should probably talk about captaincy as well. Let's kind of merge captaincy with this discussion because I think it is an interesting one. But before we get into captaincy, let's just run through the team that the algorithm optimized for Gameweek 24. And this week, the best performing formation on paper is a 5-4-1. I found that to be pretty interesting. And the players that the algorithm picked, you can see why a lot of these players are picked. So Robin Roofs, we got a triple Sunderland defense for anybody who's curious. Robin Roofs in goal, Mukiele, Dan Ballard, all playing Burnley at home. I think that tracks. I don't think I'm going to be making changes there. Chalobah against West Ham at home. I don't think I'm going to be changing anything there. Senesi against Wolves away. Again, not making a change. Munoz against Nottingham Forest away. Yeah, still that all of this is tracking pretty well for me. Ismail Assar, Mbumo, Enzo Fernandez, Bruno Fernandes, and Holland. So this team is very similar to the wildcard team that we talked about, to even my team. A lot of the players are the same, or I would like to have Roofs, but yeah. Anyways, a lot of the players are overlapping, and you could see why. The fixtures are just very good for a certain select amount of players and teams, and that's why wildcard was so popular, because Chelsea, Manchester United, Bournemouth all have these like really distinct fixture swings where they've got really good fixtures in a short amount of time. Okay, so if you've noticed from this very quick transition, there's one player that's different. So I swapped Munoz out for Gabriel, and I think that's going to be the only difference that I would suggest over the algorithm. Maybe the algorithm's wrong. I think, first of all, it's not perfect. No model is going to be perfect in a game like FPL where there's so much variance, so much random nonsense. And then just like looking through the players that I don't have, there's really not much that I would go for. Gibbs White playing Crystal Palace at home. No. Declan Rice or Saka against Leeds away. Again, I don't love that fixture. I think Leeds have been really, really good at home, even to the point where they may be able to keep Arsenal out, who haven't been the best attacking team. So why would you have like a Rice or a Saka in there? I think a 0-0 could be probable or possible. If Leeds were to get a result, I think that would be probable and possible. But how likely is it to be that Arsenal run up the score like a 4-5, 2-3, 4-5, whatever against Leeds, where missing out on a Saka or a Rice would actually be a big deal? I don't think that's as probable as them scoring like 1 or 2 random goals, because Leeds have just been so good at home, and credit to them. So this is not like a knock on Arsenal. I don't mean that at all. I just think Leeds have actually been really, really good at home. So yeah, this will be the finished team. Lock it into your brains. This, I'll try to remember to crop it and put it on the Discord this time, but for transparency, it is on the YouTube. So this is the team I'm locking in. Of course, I'm recording this ahead of the press conferences, so even if there are injuries, that's, it's part of the game. So my team is locked in. Even if there's injuries, this is what I'm going to go with. And as a very clever segue, Haaland will be captain for this team, and Erling Haaland will be captain for my team as well. I think I haven't yet. It's not 100% nailed and locked into my brain, but if this is what I tell myself. So not only does the data suggest that Erling Haaland playing Tottenham is a better match by the expected underlying projected data than Bruno Fernandes against Fulham, but if I were to say, if FPL was being written as a narrative story, wouldn't it just be so utterly perfect for Haaland to play so poorly all these weeks, people even considering selling him at this point, to go to Tottenham and then just absolutely tear shit up? Like, I'm talking 3 goals, and then everyone captains Bruno Fernandes, which I think will be a very, very popular captain this week. Not only because he's in much better form, Manchester United are in better form, and I think people are just looking for something different than Haaland. They're getting sick of that. But also, I did see that Andy, Let's Talk FPL, did, I think, say that he was going to captain Fernandes. So he has a big sway, and that means that the people that follow him are probably a little bit more likely to follow that decision. So yeah, all in all, I think Bruno is going to be a very popular captain. I think it's a great captaincy alternative to Haaland, and I think it could very well end up being a better captaincy choice. I just have to look at the data. Tottenham have been so bad, even at home. Haaland has been so good all season. He's not in the best of form right now. He got rested last week, so is there a chance that he gets rested again? Nobody knows. He could get a 1-pointer, and then that absolutely wrecks not only my free hit team, but my team as well, because I think I'm going to captain him. But I just keep going back to, I really honestly think that Haaland, this is just the most FPL thing that would happen. Everyone getting sick of Haaland, captaining somebody else, anybody else, and then Haaland just getting a hat trick. And that, I think, would be the end of Thomas Frank. I'm still surprised that he's in the job. Honestly, I thought the draw against Burnley would do it. I think I said that ahead of the match getting kicked off. I predicted a 1-1. It ended up being a 2-2. Tottenham were actually pretty good in that one, but I said ahead of that, if Tottenham don't get a result, I think Thomas Frank is going to be gone. And not because he's a bad coach. I just think it really, really has not worked. There's a culture mismatch there. I think Frank needs more time to do well. He's had bad injury issues. This is not the Tottenham podcast, but I really feel for Thomas Frank. I like him, but I think this would potentially be the dagger. I could see a big score, Manchester City. Oh my God. Manchester City versus Tottenham. I think I could see a big score in this one. Manchester United, Fulham, despite them doing so well. And I have, eaten a lot of crow on Manchester United on my predictions for them in the Man City game and in the Arsenal game, but Fulham are pretty good. I think Fulham are an underrated side. I could see that being a lot closer, especially because Fulham are not going to play in the same way that Arsenal and Man City did, where Manchester United thrive on the counter in transition. Whereas Tottenham will come out and play against Manchester City, I think. So I'm going to be captaining Haaland for the free hit team and for my own team, probably. Stay tuned for my team. I'll try to update the Discord with my final team before the deadline, but I am leaning very heavily towards Haaland at the moment, which I think is not a popular decision, despite the fact that he's probably going to have a huge percentage of captaincy. But for engaged managers, I think this is going to be a big week to go differential, and I usually go for that. This is not going to be the week for me. I think I'm going to stick with Haaland. So that is going to do it for the podcast this week, or for today, I guess. So I will have another podcast out to react to Gameweek 24. That should be out. I think, when is the last game of Gameweek 24? I am bad at finding this on the FPL app. Shout out. There is a Monday game. So Sunderland play Burnley on Monday, and I'll probably record on Monday, maybe Tuesday. So we won't have the EFL Cup update, but I'll be reacting to Gameweek 24, and hopefully I did well, because I just keep going up and down around 50K. It would be nice to make some progress in the positive direction, meaning green arrows, please, but we'll see. So for that reason, good luck with Gameweek 24, but I still hope that I do better than you. I need to win FPL, people. I'm never going to win FPL, but I would like to do very well in this thing, and 50K is not a terrible rank for kind of midway through the season. So hopefully I can progress. I'll shut up. Good luck. I'll see you to react to Gameweek 25, and I still hope I do better than you. Bye.